Okay? How about it?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dave. Can everybody hear me okay? You understand the southern accent all right? Good. Look, it's great to be here. This is one of the most welcoming states, the most beautiful states and patriotic states in the Union. If every state was like Utah, this country would not have problems, folks. Now, thank you. I know there's a lot of Mormons in the room today. I know there's a lot of John Birch Society people. I met both organisations for the first time when I was a young guy in my early 20s back in Christchurch, New Zealand. I used to work in the town's only pizza parlour, and every Sunday night you should have seen the bikes parked outside of all the young missionaries who come in to get the only pizza in town. And they were all very, very fine ambassadors for your church, I have to say. Very fine ambassadors. I also got to know of the John Birch Society at that time because friends of mine were circulating books like None Dare Call It Conspiracy and others. And I know that Ezra Taft Benson had an endorsement on the back of that book. And ever since that time, that organisation has influenced my life. The information has informed me and kept me on track. So there's a lot of gratitude for both of those organisations in my life, I have to say. Now, people always ask me, I've spoken to maybe 400 groups around your country, and people always ask me the same thing. Why would I care about America? And I say there are two reasons. The first is simple gratitude. You know, I live in the bottom of the South Pacific, and my country was facing invasion by the Japanese Imperial Army in the early days of World War II. All our boys were in North Africa fighting the Nazis. And if it hadn't been for the massive sacrifice of your fathers and uncles and grandfathers at the battles of Guadalcanal and the Coral Sea and Midway, my country would have been done, folks. And that's a very strong memory today. The second reason is related, but it's a little more selfish. Ronald Reagan had it right. This is the last best hope for mankind. If freedom should ever fail in the United States, if you should ever lose your constitution, your liberty, your economic dynamism, and your military superiority, all of which took a huge trashing through the Obama years and before, if that trend had continued, folks, we would soon be living in a world run out of Moscow and Beijing and Havana and Tehran. And is that the kind of world you would want to leave to your children, folks? If America goes down, people, we are all going down. There's no getting away from it. If America can recover its constitution, its liberty, its economic dynamism, and its military superiority, we all have a very bright future. It all hangs in the balance right now. Now, I want to talk today about national security. And I want to talk about an aspect of it that is not often discussed in this country today. It should be, but it isn't. Now, I'm sure there's some ex-military people or maybe currently serving military people today. And I know that you take an oath to defend the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic, right? Now, America is great at sending its brave sons and daughters overseas to fight those foreign enemies. But which are more dangerous in the long term? A foreign enemy over there and with a uniform and a gun pointed at you, or an enemy in your Congress or your Senate speaking your language, wearing a suit and tie, and deliberately trashing your Constitution every chance they get? Which is more dangerous in the long run, folks? And who's doing anything about them? The John Birch Society has been one of the lone voices on that front for a very long time. And I want to say, people, we might be facing difficulties today, but if there'd never been a John Birch Society, I don't think this country would have survived up to this point, to be honest. Thank you. Now, anybody here ever had to undergo any form of FBI background check for a government or civilian position? Quite a few, okay? Now, is it true that those checks can be pretty darn rigorous? They go through your family background, overseas travel, criminal convictions, bounce checks, dodgy relatives, all sorts of things. Because they need to know that you're going to be a loyal servant of the Constitution and that you can be a trustworthy individual working for the federal government. But what if you're a young Marxist radical or a young Muslim Brotherhood supporter who hangs around with the local unions and the local communists, and they control a local branch of the Democratic Party, for instance, and they get you elected to Congress, where you may serve on the Armed Services Committee or the Homeland Security Committee or even the Intelligence Committee, overseeing all 16 of your intelligence agencies. How much of an FBI background check do you need for that position, folks? Nothing. Zero. There are no background checks in Congress at all, not even to serve on the Intelligence Committee. You have to have a background check to be a realtor in Florida, but you don't need one to oversee the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the DEA, etc. Do you think your enemies might be aware of that little loophole? And do you think maybe they might try and exploit it? You imagine if you're a North Korean intelligence officer serving in the United Nations under diplomatic cover, and they have hundreds of them up there, from Saudi Arabia and Russia and Iran and China and Venezuela and Cuba. And you're holding parties with these American congressmen and senators, and you go on picnics with their families, and you know that some of them come from hard left backgrounds, or some of them have Muslim Brotherhood connections. And you work with these people continuously year after year. And so you do that for 5 years, and you go back to North Korea, and little rocket man brings you into the palace, and he says, "We gave you 5 years in America. How many American congressmen did you recruit for us?" And you say, "Oh, none." Well, how do you think that's going to go for your career, people, or your family's future for the next 5 generations? Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. See, right now you've got Andre Carson. He's a rep from Indiana. He's one of the 2 Muslims serving in Congress. Now, he is very actively involved in several Muslim Brotherhood fronts. Now, if you don't know what the Muslim Brotherhood is, it started out in Egypt in the 1920s as a secret society to establish Sharia law, the rule of Allah, across the whole planet. It is the father of Al-Qaeda. It is the father of ISIS. It's the father of Hamas, all designated terrorist organizations. But in America, it operates legally and openly through organizations like the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Muslim Students Association, etc., which has 500 branches across your country, and many other organizations. One of them is called ICNA. Now, Andre Carson was at an ICNA conference in the year 2012 in Connecticut. And he got up in front of the comrades. Now, we've run out of my movies, unfortunately. We can take orders for them. But we've got him on tape saying this. He gets up in front of the crowd and says this: "I understand there are people in this audience today who are watching us, who are here undercover, spying on us, because you believe we are here plotting to overthrow this country." Then he gives a great big grin and he says, "Well, you people who are here undercover know this: Allah will not allow you to stop us." Now, that man serves on the Intelligence Committee right now, folks. overseeing the CIA, the FBI, whatever. What could possibly go wrong with that? And what about Senator Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin? Has presidential ambitions. Now, there's an organization in Colombia in South America called the FARC. It's a communist terrorist organization. They've been fighting a war against your allies, the Colombian government, for over 50 years. Now, thanks to an Obama and Fidel Castro brokered agreement, a peace agreement, the communists are about to take over that country. Now, they are known as narco-terrorists because they make their money selling cocaine and heroin and marijuana to your young people. Now, I know that even Utah has a heroin problem today, even here. Well, Tammy Baldwin is a long-time member of a support group, the Columbia Support Network, which basically supports these Colombian terrorists. She's been a member since 1993 and is still actively supporting this group today. She has used her position in your Congress and your Senate on several occasions to try and get US military aid cut off to the Colombian government so that government will more easily fall to the communist terrorists. And when that happens, they will send even more cocaine and heroin into your country. Now, you may ask, well, surely the FBI are investigating these people and, they're on their case. Well, here's a little problem. See, you're a young Marxist or a radical. You get elected to Congress. There's no background checks. The media will not touch you. You all know how biased the media is. But surely the FBI will get involved, right? Well, for one thing, the FBI is not allowed to investigate congressmen. But say even if they did, here's a little problem. Now, there's a body in your Congress that oversees the FBI. It's called the Judiciary Committee, right? Most powerful body in your Congress. Now, let's look at some of the members of the Judiciary Committee. You've got Judy Chu from California, who is a long-time supporter of the Communist Workers' Party, a pro-China Maoist group, very militant. The Chinese press describes Judy Chu as China's best friend in your Congress. And you want to see Judy Chu tear into the FBI whenever they have the temerity to investigate one of the tens of thousands of Chinese spies operating in your country today. You are racist. You are only investigating this man because he's Chinese. The FBI is a racist organization. And she intimidates the FBI by doing that. Now remember, there's another one, a man called Jerry Nadler. He has now taken over the leadership on the Democratic side of the Judiciary Committee. He is a long-time member of Democratic Socialists of America, your largest Marxist group, which has a branch in Ogden, a branch in Salt Lake, and a branch in St. George, all established in the last couple of years. Now, remember when Acorn got in trouble in 2009? Acorn, that radical group that was signing up hundreds of thousands of fraudulent voters and doing all sorts of scams. Well, there was going to be a government investigation into Acorn. But Acorn is a front for Democratic Socialists of America. And that investigation was shut down. And guess who shut it down, people? It was Jerry Nadler, the DSA member, protecting his front organization. And what about Luis Gutierrez from Illinois? Now, Luis Gutierrez was a long-time leader of the Puerto Rican Socialist Party, a pro-Cuban communist organization. He was elected with Maoist pro-communist Chinese help on several occasions, and he's a big-time supporter of several Muslim Brotherhood front groups. And then there was one more who has thankfully just stood down. I consider him the most dangerous of your congressmen, the biggest traitor you've had in Congress for years, a man called John Conyers. Remember him? He just had to stand down over sexual harassment claims. John Conyers was in Congress about 140 years, I believe. He was probably only about 60 years, but he headed the Judiciary Committee for most of that time. And when the Democrats held the House, he was the head man. Now, John Conyers has got a 50-year history with the Communist Party USA, 40 years with Democratic Socialists of America, and 30 years with the Workers' World Party, which supports North Korea and Iran and Cuba. They are the people who've been ripping down Confederate statues in Louisiana and North Carolina. John Conyers is also a big-time supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. And I've got him on tape in my movie saying, when they tried to get the Muslim Brotherhood designated as a terrorist organisation, which it absolutely is, John Conyers is up there saying, oh no, we shouldn't do that. The Muslim Brotherhood, they've forsaken violence. They're just a peaceful social service organisation now. So you imagine the FBI decides to come to Congress and say, we need to start investigating congressmen. Well, what do you think Judy Chu and Jerry Nadler and Luis Gutierrez are going to say about that? And what do you think is going to happen to the FBI's budget next year, folks? What do you think? The FBI is stupid enough to bite the hand that feeds it? You have got at least 100 members of your House and 20 members of your US Senate. That's a fifth of each body that are so enmeshed in neo-communist organisations or Muslim Brotherhood front groups, or in many cases, both, they couldn't pass an FBI background check to drive a school bus. They couldn't sell you stamps at the post office, people, yet they are running some of your most sensitive committees right now, right this instant. And they are trashing your Constitution and opposing your president every single chance they get, folks. Did you see the Democratic caucus when President Trump did a State of the Union address recently? Did you see them sitting on their hands and scowling? Did you see one smile at any achievement made in America? The Congressional Black Caucus, when Trump said black unemployment is the lowest it's ever been, did you see the dirty looks on their faces? People, the Democratic Party now is completely controlled by Marxists and enemies of this country. And there's a whole chunk of Republicans who are not much better. We really have to understand that. So this is what I'm saying. You at least a fifth of your House and 20% of your Senate are completely working for the other side. Now, that doesn't even count the organisations that Alex talks about, the Council on Foreign Relations and Trilateral Commission. I'm talking about just hardcore, terrorist-supporting, enemy-supporting communists and Muslim Brotherhood operatives. I'm talking the low levels of the subversive order. There's that many of them. Now, I want to talk next about what I consider is the single most pressing national security threat you face today. This is the one that could destroy your country within the next few months. Basically, next 2 or 3 years at most. There's a potential to do that. And it's not North Korea, not denigrating them, not downgrading them at all. It's not Russia, it's not China, all of which are major threats. It's one thing Mitt Romney was right about. It is illegal immigration, people. Illegal immigration is your number one national security threat. And I want to explain why, because people do not usually see it in those terms. Now, the whole push for amnesty, illegal immigration started out in the 1950s in California. I'm sure there's a few refugees from California here tonight. Now, it started out with a man called Bert Corona, hardcore communist. He was also a Democrat. He set up the Viva Kennedy clubs, the first organized effort to bring Latinos into the Democratic Party. He also set up, with a lot of Saul Alinsky money out of Chicago, Saul Alinsky, the Marxist radical who mentored Hillary Clinton and inspired Barack Obama. He used his money to set up a whole network through the southern border states of support groups for illegal immigrants. And the purpose was to bring the people across the border, get them work in factories and farms, get them settled, their kids in school, and get them planted this side of the border. Now, Corona died in 2001, I believe it was, but he trained a whole bunch of acolytes to carry on his work. 3 of them are very well known in California, and they have transformed that state and are transforming your nation. The first of them is a man called Antonio Villagrosa. He was the mayor of Los Angeles. He's currently in the governor's race for California. A hardcore Marxist. He used to go down to Cuba to cut sugarcane for the Castro brothers. He is the man who banned the LAPD from enforcing any immigration laws in that city. And that encouraged hundreds of thousands of illegals to move into LA and Orange County. Second member of this little group, a man called Gil Cedillo, a Communist Party supporter, until recently the Democratic head of the California State Senate. You've heard that California granted driver's licenses to illegals recently? Well, that was Gil Cedillo's work. The third member of this little clique, another hardcore Marxist. She now serves on the Democratic National Committee and is running for a state Senate seat in California. Her name is Maria Elena Durazo. She was the head of the California AFL-CIO, the unions. She is behind the massive union-driven and union-paid-for Latino voter registration drives and get out the vote efforts that added hundreds of thousands of new Latino voters to the California rolls in the last 20 years. And guess which party they voted for by a margin of 4-1, folks? Not your one, people. The Democrats. The result of this deliberate Marxist program has been to turn California from a reddish, purplish state to solidly blue. You cannot elect a conservative in California now statewide for love nor money. The state of Reagan, people. And now you think about the implications of that when it comes to presidential elections. They have the most electoral college votes in the country, and they go straight to the Democrats. Gives the Democrats a huge advantage right off the get-go. Now, the leader of the amnesty movement today is a man called Eliseo Medina. You've seen him on TV, I guarantee it, wearing a purple shirt, SEIU. He is the executive vice president of the SEIU union, and he was the man who got the amnesty bill pushed through your Senate about 3 years ago, and was Obama's advisor on all issues of immigration. And Obama admits this. Now, Eliseo Medina is a card-carrying member of Democratic Socialists of America. He's a Marxist, and he is the man, people. He's been crisscrossing the country for 20 years promoting this cause. Now, I just want to ask, I don't know about this room, but any former or current Labour Union members here today? 1 or 2 or 3, okay? Just think back, folks. Which organisation in America 25 years ago was the most hardcore, militantly opposed to any form of illegal immigration whatsoever? Which organisation had people on the border trying to stop illegals coming across, who was constantly lobbying Congress to increase penalties on any employer caught employing illegals? It was the unions, AFL-CIO, Cesar Chavez and the farm workers, because they understood that illegal immigrants were a disaster for union workers. They would take their jobs, they would lower their wages and conditions, they would break their strikes. And because the unions took that position, the Democrats took the same position, and you should have seen the speeches that Harry Reid and Bill Clinton used to give in the early 90s. You can see them on C-SPAN, condemning illegal immigration as a disaster when it was 250,000 a year. This was destroying America's jobs. This was a national security issue. They sounded like Tea Party folk, people. But now, if you look around America today, which organisations are pushing for amnesty the hardest right now? It's the unions and the Democrats following along. Because see, what happened before 1994, American labour unions were run by hardcore and pro-American patriots like George Meany and Lane Kirkland. They put America first, people. They may not have been the most upstanding people in some ways, but they were not traitors. In 1994, Democratic Socialists of America took over the AFL-CIO. They purged all the conservatives and they put their member, a Marxist, John Sweeney, in as president. He took out the prohibition on communists standing for office inside the AFL-CIO. The Marxists came flooding in. All those 60s and 70s radicals became union organisers and union presidents. And now every single major labour union in your country is Marxist controlled. SEIU, AFSCME, United Auto Workers, NEA, you name it, the communists run it today in America. So what are the implications for that? You tell me one elected Democrat in this country who gets elected without labour union support. You tell me one. The unions are completely in control of the Democratic Party and they completely dictate their policies. So if the communists control the unions and the unions control the Democratic Party and dictate its policies, what kind of policies do you think the Democratic Party is pushing? You want to know what the Democrats are going to do tomorrow? Read the Communist Party newspaper today. $15 an hour minimum wage, nuclear deal with Iran, normalization of relations with Cuba. Everything the Democrats did on Obama was communist policy, people. It was all communist policy. 40,000 American communists were running America when Barack Obama was the president. And they're still trying to do it today. And they're still having some success, unfortunately. So you think about why are they pushing amnesty? Why is this their big deal? Why are they going out on a limb for it? Why did Obama go out on a limb for amnesty in 2014, knowing it would cost him the Senate? Why did Hillary Clinton promise to legalize every single illegal in the country within 100 days of taking office? Well, Alisea Medina let the cat out of the bag at a big progressive conference in Washington, D.C. in 2009. I've got him on tape. He's in my movie saying this. He gets up in front of the crowd and says this: passing amnesty for our 11 million undocumented workers is the number one priority of the progressive movement. And did he talk about compassion or dreamers or giving immigrants a break or the American dream? Not one word, people. All he said was this: in 2008, Latinos voted overwhelmingly for Obama and progressive candidates. If we give these people citizenship and voting rights, they will stand with our movement. That will give us, the Democratic Party, at least 8 million new voters. That will give us a governing majority, not just for the next few election cycles, forever. Think about it, people. Do a little bit of math. Mitt Romney lost his election by 2.5 million votes. Donald Trump won by about 200,000 votes and actually lost the popular vote by 2 million. Just thank God for the wisdom of your founding fathers and the Electoral College. That's all I can say. But do the math. There are between 12 and 40 million illegals in this country today. If they are given citizenship and voting rights, they will vote at least 80% Democrat. That gives the Democrats between 10 and 24 million new votes straight off the top. What do you think that's going to do to your country, folks? How are you ever going to fight back against that? You've seen what it's done to California. They intend to do that across this whole country. That is why Hillary Clinton promised to legalize every illegal. That is why Barack Obama went out on a limb to try and push amnesty through in 2014. Because Barack Obama is a Marxist-Leninist. And Lenin was all about one step backwards to get two steps forwards. Yeah, we'll give the Republicans the Senate. They'll be so excited. But we will win every single election for eternity from that point. We will have a one-party state. There will be no opposition to us. And we will do to you what every other communist regime has done to its people all over the planet. Do you think the Democrats are just progressives people? Do you think they're just really a bit liberal but a bit misguided? You saw that State of the Union, people. They have been taken over by the most corrupt elements in this country. And if they win one more election and impose amnesty on you, they're going to turn this country into Venezuela pretty darn quickly and Cuba not long after. That is their plan, people. On election night 2016, you came that close to losing your country, people. This is not 10, 20, 30 years away. This is one bad election away. One election and your country is gone if we blow this. So this is how I see it, people. You were given in that election, does anybody believe there might have been a touch of the miraculous on the last election? I think even an atheist would have to acknowledge that, folks, really. So you think about it. We were given there's a lot of people out there, unfortunately, think that election was a whole new change in direction, that everything was going to be okay and we could all have a holiday now. I see it differently. That was our last shot to save America. There were enough good people, there are enough people who stood up that God smiled on us and gave us one last shot. Now, if you look at the Old Testament, there's a lot of last chances in the Old Testament, a lot of second chances. The Israelites, you're not doing the right thing, you better get sorted out or else. And sometimes they did and sometimes they didn't. But how many third chances were there in the Old Testament, folks? How many third chances? Well, we are on our second chance. And I don't think if we blow this one, I don't want to be going out of cap in hand and saying, can we please have another one? Please? I don't know what will happen, folks, but I don't want to risk that. Now, I want to say something to lighten the mood slightly. The Germans have a great word. It's called Schadenfreude, and it means to take pleasure in the pain of others. It's not a very noble thing, right? It's not very, you don't want to be proud of it. But if anybody watched the election night results and you looked at when they panned the Democratic Party headquarters about 2 a.m. and you saw those little snowflakes hugging each other and bawling their eyes out, did you feel a little bit of Schadenfreude? And do you think after 8 years of Obama trash in your country, you maybe deserved it? Well, please hold on to that feeling, folks, because we do not want them to be having that feeling in 2018 and 2020. We do not want them to be enjoying our pain on those nights. Because this is where we're at, folks. This is my opinion. Has anybody ever seen as much vitriol and contempt directed at a sitting president in their lifetime? Anything even close, even under Reagan or Bush? The left absolutely despises the president. The deep state absolutely wants to destroy him. Is there any doubt of that? They've made it very clear. Now, I think there are two reasons for that. One is very easy to understand because see, the left, the Democrats, the young radicals, they were so pumped up on their own propaganda. They were so excited on election night because they knew Hillary was going to win. They knew they were going to have power. They knew they were going to get their way and legalize everything they wanted to do and, shut down your businesses and churches and all that kind of stuff. They're all so excited. And on election night, they were like a bunch of kids who thought they're going to get the biggest bike you've ever seen for Christmas, and they got a pair of socks. And they are bitter. They are disappointed and angry. But that's the first part of it. The real thing is this, in my opinion. Because see, if you're a Democrat, you own certain segments of the population, right? That's how you think. You own the black community. You own the Latino community. You own those white union guys up in Minnesota and Michigan and Ohio and Pennsylvania. They're going to vote for you no matter what. You don't have to do anything for them. They're just going to vote for you. That's your locked-in base. Well, when President Trump went out to those out to the Latinos and said, look, are we going to stop this illegal immigration, guys? Because we know that a lot of legal Latinos in this country don't want to get tarred with that brush, that you're contributing members of the society. And a lot of Latinos said right on, and they switched their vote. And when he went to the black communities, he said, I don't see a lot of prosperity here in your cities, your Democrat-controlled cities. I see a lot of drugs and crime and poverty. Why don't you vote for me, guys? What do you got to lose? And a whole bunch of them said, heck yeah. And when he went to those white union guys out in Pennsylvania and Ohio, he said, I don't see a lot of booming factories here. I see a lot of closed down factories, rust, poverty, unemployment, meth, heroin. Why don't you guys vote for me? We're going to bring the industry back and the jobs back to your communities. And they threw away 40 years of voting Democrat and they switched to give President Trump a chance. And all of that was enough to make the difference. And that is freaking the Democrats out, folks. They are freaking out because that's their base. And they understand that if President Trump is a successful president, that he does put America first, that he seals that border, that he stops the refugee resettlement from the Middle East, that if he lowers the taxes and reduces the regulations, all of which he is doing, that if he continues to put America first, he's already getting us out of UNESCO, and hopefully United Nations is next. If he can keep all of that going, you imagine the money that is going to come flowing into this country. You imagine the trillions of dollars that will flow in from overseas accounts and overseas to invest in the most dynamic economy in the world. You imagine the prosperity that we could have. You saw how quickly Ronald Reagan turned around Jimmy Carter's mess, folks. Well, we can have that again and in spades. And the Democrats know that. And they're going to do everything they can to sabotage that, because if they know that Donald Trump is successful, they are finished. They are done, people. They are fighting a desperate battle for survival, and there's no rat more dangerous than a cornered rat, folks. That's the position we're in today. So the first step of their plan is very simple. Destroy Trump, impeach Trump, denigrate Trump, sabotage him, sabotage his base, divide his base, do everything you can to make sure he fails. And this is the second part of their plan, folks. This is how evil they are. Who remembers the old Jesse Jackson Rainbow Coalition of the 1980s? Jesse Jackson, that great scamster. So he had the brilliant idea. See, the left thinks in terms of identities. You're black, you're Latino, you're not an individual, you are part of your group. So they had so Jesse Jackson came up with the idea of the Rainbow Coalition. You get the progressive whites, progressive blacks, progressive Latinos, progressive Asian Americans, Native Americans, gay Americans, Muslim Americans, white, brown, black, yellow, lavender, green, the Rainbow Coalition. And he got 8 million votes with that in 1988. It was a pretty creditable effort, for that guy. Now, the Rainbow Coalition, most of the officers in it were Maoist. They were pro-Chinese communists, mainly from the Line of March and the League of Revolutionary Struggle. And one of them was a man called Stephen Phillips. He was based at Stanford University, very active in the Rainbow Coalition, a Maoist communist radical. And he learned a lot of lessons. Now, after 1988, Jesse Jackson moved on to other scams and the Rainbow Coalition went away. But the idea did not die. Now, Steve Phillips, the League of Revolutionary Struggle dissolved in 1990 and they all moved into the Democratic Party. Steve Phillips married very, very well. He married into the Sandler family from San Francisco, multi-billionaire Democratic Party donors. Huge, huge money. And he used that money to buy himself a lot of influence in the Democratic Party. He was the first man to fund Barack Obama, for instance. And he set up a group called Power PAC. And Power PAC is funding candidates of color, Latino, Asian American, black, and a few whites, but mainly in the southern states, in areas where there are large black and Latino populations. They're putting a whole bunch of money behind these candidates and behind voter registration drives in these states. Now, he has written a book called Brown is the New White, and it was endorsed by Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi. You can see it online anytime. And his argument is very simple. Democrats, forget about the middle. Don't go wasting your time trying to convert a few voters in the middle. Go hardcore for your progressive base. Hardcore, which is what they're doing right now. And his argument is simple. 26% of the electorate are white progressives. They will vote Democrat if Adolf Hitler was on the ticket. They wouldn't care. 25% of the electorate, because the minorities are much greater now, 25% of the electorate are minorities, progressives of colour, black, Latino, Asian American, Native American, black American, etc. 25 plus 26 is 51. The new American majority, they call it. 51% minimum of the voting base are locked in for the Democrats if they play it right. So that is what he is doing. He's going out right now funding these and others. He's working with the communist groups around the country. They are funding candidates of colour. They're getting behind Ben Jealous, who's standing for the governorship of Maryland, Stacey Abrams, who's standing for the governorship of Georgia, Andrew Gillum's the governorship of Florida, a whole bunch of congressional and Senate candidates. They stood behind Tulsi Gabbard out in Hawaii. They stood behind, there's a whole bunch of them. So this is what they plan to do. Destroy Trump, then run the Rainbow Coalition strategy in 2018 and 2020. And you've already seen it starting to play out. Virginia was once a red state. A communist group, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, working with Steve Phillips and with demographic information supplied straight out of China, has been signing up hundreds of thousands of black and Latino voters and Muslim voters in Virginia, and they worked with the governor of Virginia to allow 200,000 felons voting rights. That effort has turned Virginia from a reddish state to almost now completely blue. It's almost completely lost to our side. They also did this in Alabama with the Roy Moore election. Now, Roy Moore should have won that election, Senate election, easily. But when he was damaged by the scandals, Steve Phillips and his friend put thousands of volunteers into Alabama and millions of dollars, signed up a whole bunch of voters, and they beat Roy Moore by 20,000 votes with a man called Doug Jones. The leader of CARE in Alabama, the Council on American Islamic Relations, a Muslim Brotherhood front group, openly boasted that they elected Doug Jones because Doug Jones won by 20,000 votes and they signed up 20,000 Muslim voters in that state and they all voted for the Democrat. That is the strategy they are using right now, and now they are targeting Florida, which was won by Trump by 120,000 votes, and 150,000 Puerto Ricans have just moved into the state. They are targeting Texas, North Carolina, Arizona, and Georgia. And they only have to flip one or two of those, and we cannot win in 2020. Virtually impossible to win. So they are pouring people into these southern states to give us our big surprise in 2018 and 2020. Does any of this sound far-fetched, folks, or way over the top? Now, the presidential candidates, I have an idea who I think it will be. At Stanford University in the 1980s, there was a young black football player who hung around with the Marxists. He hung around with the Maoists. He was one of their buddies. That man is now the senator from New Jersey, a man called Cory Booker. He is completely funded by Stephen Phillips. He's Stephen Phillips' creation. There's another person, there was a young woman who used to hang around with the radicals there, a woman called Maya Harris. You may know her sister. Her sister is Kamala Harris, the new senator from California. They are going to run Kamala Harris and Cory Booker on the top of the ticket. Kamala Harris is half black, half Asian. Cory Booker is black. They may bring in one or two others. That's not, but I'm almost certain it's going to be Kamala Harris on the top of the ticket. So they're going to run a black and a black Asian candidate at the top of the ticket. They're going to run the Rainbow Coalition strategy across the country, but especially in the southern states who have large numbers of black and Latino voters who don't normally vote. And they are going to do a mass mobilization effort against what they hope is a severely weakened Donald Trump, maybe an impeached Donald Trump, and win that election by 51, 52, 53% of the vote. Then they're going to legalize every single illegal in the country. They're going to ramp up the refugee resettlement from the Middle East, and you will become, any conservative Christian in this country will become a very much persecuted permanent minority in this country. That is their plan, folks. That is exactly what they are working on right now. So I'm saying to you, if you think you can sit out the 2018 and 2020 elections and just hope it's all going to go right, think about your children and your grandchildren, folks. Because if we blow the next two elections, we are blowing this country. The country is out of our reach from that point. The 2016 election was the first game in the World Series. But how many games do you have to win the World Series, folks? 4 out of 7, right? And it's even worse than that. We don't just have to win 4, we have to win 4 in a row. Because if we blow one of them, we blow 2018, which is at big risk right now, they are going to impeach the president and tie him up in knots, and nothing will get done for 2 years. And they will figure, well, his base will be discouraged. We're going to run the Rainbow Coalition strategy, lots of idealism, Obama all over again, and we're going to romp to victory. Does this strategy sound a bit far-fetched, folks? It's exactly what they are planning to do. And the only thing that is stopping them from doing it is us. Because that last election was a miracle. And it was a miracle. It only was allowed to happen, as people have said, because a lot of good people worked very, very hard. And we were given the grace of winning that election because of the people who still love this country and were still willing to stand up for America first, for the American Constitution, and everything that makes this country the best country the world has ever seen. There was enough good people to save it, folks. But if anybody thinks we're out of the woods, if anybody thinks we're out of danger, we are not. But the good news is this. If there were enough good people to save the country 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, there's certainly enough good people to save it in 2018 and 2020 and 2022. You imagine if we can string 4 elections together. Bang, 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 bang. You imagine how the taxes are going to be then. You imagine how the economy is going to be then. You imagine how much better we're going to be off with maybe a couple more good Supreme Court justices. You imagine the difference that there will be in this country by that time. You imagine if we've abolished the Department of Education. You imagine you can actually control education in your own state again. You can stop brainwashing your kids. You imagine how different this country could be in 4 or 5 years if we stay the course. You imagine had there never been a Ronald Reagan, people, had Jimmy Carter got 2 terms, the Democrats got 2 terms. Imagine the state this country would be in today. I don't think you'd be much better off than Venezuela, to be honest. But because enough good people stood up for Reagan, he made enough of a difference to keep the bad guys away, just enough to get this country back on its feet. Well, if President Trump can get a clear run for the next few election cycles and keep on doing the good stuff, you imagine how different this country could be, folks. Do you feel a lot more optimism today than you did 2 years ago, folks? You imagine how we'd all feel today if Hillary Clinton was the president. I don't think half of you would be here. You wouldn't be many smiles or laughter or joking around the room, I'll tell you that. So elections make a difference, and I fully understand the wheels behind the wheels. I understand the bad guys out there, but we have proven in the last election, and we've proven with Reagan and other presidents in the past, that elections can still make a difference. You cannot tell me this country is a lot better off today than it would have been had we blown the last election, that there's a lot more hope. So what I'm asking from you guys is to take the next election very, very seriously. The Republicans only hold a 23 majority in the House right now, and most incumbent parties lose 20 to 30 seats in a midterm election. So we got a challenge. We got a real challenge. And if we do it, if we win and win big, the Democrats are going to be so discouraged by 2020, that will be easy. The big election is 2018. Because if we blow 2018, the president gets impeached. Guaranteed. The whole agenda stops, and the left goes crazy, and we're discouraged, and they are encouraged, and we're in trouble. So this is what I want to say. This country is a special country. As Mormons, I know there's a lot of Mormons in the room, you know that you were given a constitution by God. You know that you were given a constitution that has biblical roots. You know that this is a special country. Do you want to lose this country on your watch, folks? Do you think if you have been given the greatest... See, there's some Christians, some church people, probably some Mormons who will say to you, well, we shouldn't really get involved in politics. It's a dirty game. Well, of course it's a dirty game if the good people aren't involved in it. What is it going to be? But I argue this. If your neighbour, next door neighbour, is starving and you do nothing to help, is that a Christian thing to do? If your town is being flooded, the river has breached the banks, and everybody's trying to sandbag, and you sit home on your computer and don't help, is that a Christian thing to do? So if your country is going to hell in a handbasket, and you think you have no responsibility whatsoever for trying to save it, is that a Christian attitude? You've been given the greatest country the world has ever seen, the greatest country. How does any Christian say they have no responsibility to maintain that? If you're given a farm and you let it run to rack and ruin, is that Christian? Well, if you're given the greatest country the world has ever seen and you sit back and let that run to rack and ruin, is that a Christian thing to do? Is it Christian not to be involved in the civic affairs of your own town, your own state, and your own nation? Is it Christian to ignore all of those things? Is it not a responsibility to be involved in maintaining the greatest country the world has ever seen? So we're given the choice. We can all sit back now and hope things go right in 2018. We can hope. And maybe they will. But I wouldn't be betting on it. Or we can double down, get involved in any way we can, because President Trump doesn't need just more Republicans. He needs more conservative, constitutional Republicans. That is what he needs. You imagine if you had another 7 or 8 Mike Lees in the Senate. You imagine if you had another 8 or 10 or 20 Louis Gohmerts in the House. Imagine how easier it would be to get what he needs to do done. Well, that is within our power to do, folks. We have the ability to influence elections, not just here, but in other states. Do you know which state, this will surprise you, do you know which state contributed more to President Trump's victory than any other? Guarantee no one will know. It was California. Because California had 335,000 volunteers in their team. 45,000 in any one day manning the phone banks into Florida, into Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan. They were phone banking into 5 states and they won every single one of them, even Michigan. So don't tell me, people, you cannot be involved. Even if you don't want to get involved in an election in your state, there's very critical elections in Wyoming, Montana, all over the country. People can be involved. There's no excuse, folks. You pick the most conservative person you can find in the most strategic position and you door knock for them and phone bank for them. And we want to win the next election with another 7 or 8 real conservatives in the House and another 10 or 20 real conservatives, 7 or 8 in the Senate, 10 or 20 in the House. Wouldn't that make a difference, folks? And if you're looking at your children's future, your grandchildren's future, can you think of any more effective use of your time than making sure this presidency is as successful as it possibly can be? Because we don't get opportunities like this very often, folks. I'm not trying to put President Trump on a profile. I spent most of the time in the election cycle trashing him. He wasn't my first choice, but he won and he has done a lot of good stuff since. Some bad stuff, but a lot of good stuff. And how long since we've had that opportunity, people? Are we going to sit back and blow it? So this is how it goes, folks. We can sit back and do nothing, play more golf, hunt more deer, all those are good things. We can do that, that's great. But we got to think about our children, people, because one day your children are going to look you in the eye and they're going to say one of 2 things. Dad, how did you let this happen? How did you lose this? What did you do? Or they're going to say, wow, when we took the country back, when we re-established the Constitution, you were part of that, weren't you, Dad? You were part of that, weren't you, Mum? What do you want to say? So we got 2 choices. We can sit back, do nothing, all hope it goes well. But I can guarantee you this, if we keep that attitude, eventually your children will live in slavery. That is guaranteed. But if you give it everything you've got that's within you for your God, your constitution, and your family, if you give it everything that's within you for those 3 things, 2 things may happen. One is we may do everything we possibly can and still lose. But at least you will earn the right to look your children in the eye and say, I did everything I could. What is that worth to you, folks? And if you win, and you can win, that last election convinced me that God is not finished with this country yet, folks. If you win and keep on winning, you will set this country up for a massive economic boom. But even better, you will inspire liberty revolutions all over this planet, folks. Don't you think other people want liberty too? Don't you think they're not all looking at America to see which way America goes? Do you think those protesters in Iran recently who stood up to the mullahs at the risk of their lives would have done that had Hillary Clinton been president? You saw in Britain, when they had the chance, they voted for Brexit. There are people all over craving freedom, folks, but it all depends on which way America goes. Because if America goes down, the light goes with it. But if America restores its constitution, and its liberty and its economy. You're going to spark liberty and prosperity all over this world. You're going to fire people up all over, folks. You'll be the shining city on the hill that this country was always destined to be. So I want to say to you people, if you give it everything you've got, you have the very real chance of sparking an economic boom and a liberty boom and giving your children not just the amazing country that you inherited, but one even greater. Is that worth fighting for, folks? So I want to say to you folks, thank you so much for what you do for America, for liberty, for my country. God bless America, God bless Utah, and God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I know. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Look, I've got books out there. A few. If we run out, I can take orders and mail them to you. You can order my DVD and mail them to you. I only say this because you're in a war. You got to know your enemies, and the books name the enemies. But I just want to say more than anything, I want to thank Dave for inviting me here today. I want to thank you people for all attending. The only reason I do what I do is because you people are doing what you do. So I'm very proud to be amongst you and very grateful to be invited to speak to you. Thank you very much.